Okay, so let's now see how to install Splunk Enterprise trial version on Mac OS. So as we've seen for the cases of Windows and Linux, it's the same. You have to access your trial package on the Splunk website, which is going to bring you to like the screenshot you see here on the left side. And then all you have to do is to go to the Mac OS tab. So what you realize is you have two installer options there. The first one is a DMG file that you can use for a graphical installation. And then the second option is a tar file that you can use for a command line or CLI installation. So what you have to do then is just download the installer that corresponds to what you want to do. The first case we're going to see here is the graphical installation. So you download the graphical installation file into your machine. The first thing you have to double click on it, and then you double click on install Splunk to start the installer. So in that case, you're starting to install Splunk, and again during the process, it's going to ask you to accept the license agreement. So you have to do that in order to continue installation. Then you'll be prompted to start Splunk. So this is a bit different from what we saw with Windows and Linux. With Windows, we saw that you install Splunk, then ultimately you start Splunk post-installation. And then with Linux, it was the same. So you install Splunk, and then post-installation, you're going to start Splunk. So in each case, we had to navigate to the binary or the folder that contains the binary within Splunk Home and start Splunk from there. But with Mac OS, is different. So as you're installing Splunk on Mac OS, is going to ask you to start Splunk at the time of installation. So you just have to do that when you are prompted to, and then it's also going to ask you to specify the username and password credentials that you're going to use to log into your Splunk instance as an administrator. So the last thing we're going to see here is the default installation directory for Mac OS. That is Splunk Home for Mac OS is applications/Splunk. For Windows, again, it was program file/Splunk, and then the default for Linux was opt/Splunk. That's very, very important to understand when you install Splunk on the different operating systems. So the second one we're going to see here is the CLI installation, which is almost the same again like what we saw for Linux. All you need to do is that you have to take the downloaded tar file that you have from Splunk, and then typically you want to put it under the applications folder. So if you want to install in the default home location, which is applications/Splunk, then you have to put that file in the applications folder, and then you expand that tar file using the tar command. And if you want to install in a different directory, then of course you can always specify that different directory as well. Okay, so let's look at the post-installation steps for installing Splunk Enterprise on Mac OS. For Mac OS, post-installation steps only apply for the CLI installation because, as we said, for the graphical user installation, everything is done at once. So now you have to go navigate to application/Splunk/bin. That is your Splunk Home, as we said, and then from there you're gonna have to start Splunk. That's when you install it on CLI. And then the second thing that you have to do is for CLI, you don't accept the license agreement when you're installing. So you have to accept it when you're starting Splunk, just like you do for the case of Linux. So it's going to give you the opportunity to accept your license agreement. And then you're going to also have to create the username and password credentials that you're going to use to log into your instance as an administrator. And then another thing is to enable boot start. Remember, we saw that for the case of Linux, enabling boot start was mandatory. Because if you don't do that and you happen to restart your Linux machine, then your Splunk instance is not going to start automatically. So for for Mac OS as well, you have commands to enable boot start. But typically, there are scripts that already do this for you, but you can also do this manually if you choose to. So all you have to do is to navigate into the applications Splunk, that's your home, and then go into the binary folder. And then in there, that's where you have your Splunk binary. You're going to just do enable boot start. And then there you are very sure that anytime that you reboot your Mac OS machine, your Splunk instance is automatically going to start. Now, what is the next thing? Again, because now at this point you've completed installation, you've completed the post-installation steps as well, you want to be able to log into your instance and start using it. So this is exactly the same as we saw again for Windows and for Linux. You just to connect to Splunk Web, you're going to use port 8000, and then you're going to use this HTTP localhost if you have installed it on your local machine. So if you install Mac OS on a local machine, this is going to work. But if you have it in a remote instance, then you will have to put the IP address of that remote instance and then put the port number in order to connect. So after it gives you this login prompt here, when you specify that, then all you have to do is put the username and password credentials that you created during installation, and then you'll be able to log into your Splunk instance. Welcome to the demo for installing a Splunk Enterprise trial version on Mac OS. So what we've done here, just like we did for the case of Linux, is that we're using a virtual machine. So we've basically initiated an EC2 instance with Mac OS on AWS, and then we're going to connect to that instance and install Splunk. So let me try to just share this part of it here. So what you see on my screen here is a VNC viewer. And this is using the VNC protocol that runs on port 5900. So we're going to use this to connect to the graphical user interface, the GUI of our remote instance. So what I'm going to do here, I will just double click this and then continue here, and I'm going to insert my password. All right, my password again. Okay. All right, so you see that here now we are connected to our virtual machine that's running Mac OS, basically like any physical machine that you're going to use. So the steps that we're using here is exactly the same steps that you're going to apply on a physical machine if you have a Mac OS laptop, for example. So we're going to go again to the Splunk website here. So let's just go to our browser. I'm going to do here Splunk. Let's take splunk.com. Okay, if I go to free Splunk here, and then I'm going to come to this same place where we were, when we went through free trials and downloads. So basically, it just takes you to the Splunk website, right? And if you didn't have a login again, as we said, then you're probably going to have to create one here. Or if you already have, access to the website, you'll have to log in with your credentials, which is what I'm going to do in my case here. All right, so now it's logging me to the Splunk website. I'm just going to say not now. All right, so now I'm connected here. I'm going to click here, free trials and downloads page. And then what we're going to see here is exactly the options that we had when we were looking at, Windows. And when we connected to the website, we saw Splunk Cloud, Enterprise, and the Universal Forwarder. So our interest here is on the Splunk Enterprise free trial, right? So we go to the free trial here. And when we go there again, we're going to access all those options that we saw. Now, since we are looking at Mac OS, we go to the Mac OS tab. We're going to see the DMG, which is the GUI installation, and the tar file, which is the CLI installation, as we discussed in the theory part. All right, so we're just going to download the DMG file here since we are doing the GUI installation. So we click on download, and it's going to start downloading for us. Do you want to allow downloads? Yes, let's allow. And then you see it's showing you the status up here. All right, this might take a while, so I'm just going to pause and we'll be back when download is completed. All right, now our DMG file is completely downloaded. So we're going to go access it in our downloads folder, right? If we go there and then we just open downloads, then you're going to see this is our DMG file here that we just downloaded. So again, as we saw in the theory, all we really need to do is we double click this, and then it's going to open this install, and then we just start installing Splunk. So you click on install Splunk and then continue. And then here you're now going to have to accept the license. Remember, we've been talking about the licensing, even for the case of Windows and for the case of Linux. So it's the same thing here. You read the license. You have an option to read it if you want to do that. But what we're going to do is just to agree the license. Okay. And then now we click on install. All right, it's going to ask for the credentials to the machine, which I'm just going to add here. All right, so installation is complete now, and then you see this little helper here, which says that we need to perform a brief initialization. So we're just going to click OK on this, and then OK. And then now it's going to ask us to set those credentials, right, that we're going to use to log into Splunk Web UI. So I'm just going to put them here. That's my username, now password. All right. So I have that set up. And then now it would ask, what do you like to do? Only start Splunk. start and show Splunk, right? So now remember that we said with the GUI installation for Mac OS, everything is done. So as you install, as part of the installation, it's going to ask you to start Splunk, right? So you're just going to click here, start and show. So it's starting Splunk for us now. All right, so Splunk is started, and because we say start and show, is now going to just go straight to localhost, right? Where it's going to give us now the prompt for us to log into our Splunk Web UI. So we can go here, put our admin, and then the password that we just configured at time of installation. Sorry. All right. Oh, no. All right, so that's it. We're logged into our Splunk Web UI, and that's just how you do it on Mac OS. It's pretty straightforward. You don't have to do anything else. So this is the end of the demo for installing Splunk Enterprise trial version on Mac OS.